Okay, so to start talking about Indian classical music, we should always have just a little bit of the alap just to get the atmosphere of the rag going. But that's really quite different from what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be moving on to the rhythmic improvisation and particularly how you map that onto a composition. So first of all, we're going to be working with this Rag Kirvani composition in tin tal, and I'll just play this for you. I'll just play the composition a few times round. It's a short melody, just so you get the idea of what we're working with, and then I'll start to show you the different ways to apply the improvisation and what kind of games we'll start to play with that essentially. Okay, so here's the tin tal. And the composition comes in on beat 6. So 16 beat cycle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1. Actually, it comes in on beat 7. So I'm counting 6 beats and then coming in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's beat number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First beat again. So first of all, we just want to be really used to the feeling of where the first beat is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1. So you just need to feel it really as 4 groups of 4. So like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But then you get used to where every beat is in between, and then where you are in the overall cycle. So it really helps. You need to know it as 16 in terms of how you analyze it and how you can count. So you need to be aware of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1. So you can feel you can count each beat. But when you're feeling it, it's often good just to feel it as 4 groups of 4. And those are the strong beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, corresponding with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1. So the tin tal, you have to just know that really, really well. And then you're going to start to talk about playing improvisation and then just coming back to the first beat. So simple phrases, just coming back to the first beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Particularly coming back to the sa, back to the central note on beat number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4. So just get used to doing this, very simple phrases. And you're learning to kind of just judge and predict how many notes you've got to play to then land back on the target note, being sa in this case. And you can do that in a very simple way, or you could jump notes. We don't tend to jump notes so often in Indian music. We tend to do things more kind of linear. So this is very important. And then the next thing that we would like to be able to do is to go back to the composition. So we want to improvise and then join back into the composition. So the most simple way to do that is to start with like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So just, you know that you're coming in on beat 7. So I'm going to improvise for 6 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, this is a very simple way to start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So just being aware of that space and then starting to use that space to improvise. And then it's nice to start taking a whole cycle to improvise. Be aware of the first beat and then map your way simply back to the composition. So I can improvise for a whole cycle and maybe relax a bit more. So So I'm just being very aware of that first beat, so then I can play a simple phrase to come back to the composition starting on beat 7. Yeah. So yeah, question here is that when you listen to Tin Tao, most of the beats sound the same, so without looking at the screen you can't tell which beat you're on. So yeah, it does have a hypnotic quality to it, so it does take time to get used to that. There's the 1. But what you're listening out for is when the buyer drops out. It's also good, I can turn the tempura down a bit, because sometimes the tempura drone actually makes the tabla harder to discern. So what you're listening out for is when the bass drum, the buyer part of the tabla drops out. Dun, 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 dun. So it drops out there. Dun, 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 da, din, din, da, da, din, din, da, da, din, din, na, na, din, din, da, da, din, din, da, da, din, din, da, da, din, din, na, na, din, din, da, da. So those are the spoken bowls, the words of the tabla in that Tin Tao cycle. So you really want to say that a lot to yourself, and if you say that along with the tabla, then you'll start to notice the da din din da da din din da da tin tin na na din din da da din din da da din din da tin tin na and tick din din da. There's often a ticker, like an extra strike on the 13th. Din din da. So not all of the cycles have that, but they often do that. And also, it might be that you're not playing your tabla through a proper speaker that has a good bass response. If you just play it through your phone on the app, you won't hear the bass properly. So you need to really hear those bass frequencies. And you'll get used to it. It becomes more internalized because you're also learning how to just keep that sense of time. So. Feeling that set of 4s. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just feeling a sense of 4 beats. Well, 4 groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so you can contextualize it in different ways. But doing the spoken approach, you know, the da din din, like the da din din da da din din da da din din na din 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 da da. That will just get your ear tuned in with the tabla. So you can count it, you can feel it, you can hear it by listening to the strokes. You kind of need, what I try to do is know it intimately in as many different ways as I can, so it kind of builds a complete picture. And you get used to the type of phrases that you can play. You get used to the kind of phrases that fit into that space. Okay, so now I'll just do a bit more improvisation, just coming back to the beat 7 that the composition starts on, just so you guys get a bit more of the feel for that. I'll just play for a bit, and then we'll start looking at these Tihar rhythms. Yeah, okay, and then Kaushik, I'll answer your question in a moment. Okay. Just stop that for a moment. Okay, how do you split your practice time between alap practice and drup practice with tabla for a rag? So that depends what kind of schedule I'm on, what sort of thing I'm building up to doing. So there was a time when I was doing, for example, I was doing some concerts with the trio that we were playing with before the whole pandemic broke out. Hopefully we're doing more concerts next year, actually. But we would be, for example, doing four concerts, and maybe two of them would be like two nights in a row with no rehearsal. So it was no group rehearsal. So we would talk, me and Manish, slide guitar player, would talk through WhatsApp and send each other videos and audios and say, right, let's do this and let's do this composition. So I had a kind of map of, right, we're going to do this rag, and I need to be able to work through these different time cycles and these compositions, and then we're going to do this rag, and it's going to be with these cycles, and then we're going to go straight to the next concert and then have 2 more rags or 3 more rags. So I had to make sure that I knew everything really well. So when I looked at it like that, I found it very useful to make a schedule so I could touch on it on kind of a little bit of everything. So at that time, though, I building up to that for a couple of days, I did 6 hours practice a day. I used to do a lot more practice than that, but what I do now is, this is kind of my practice time. This is part of my practice time, because I'm either teaching or editing a video or filming a video or doing a live stream or doing something or doing some notation. But I used to be able to practice a lot more. But now it's just when I pick up my guitar, I'm normally getting paid for it, if you know what I mean. So what I was doing with these concerts is that I was saying, right, I'm going to really set aside 6 hours a day just for proper practice. And what I worked out is that I could spend maybe 15 minutes on the alap of Rag 1, and then 15 minutes on the Volambit section, 15 minutes on the Jala, on the Drut, and then 15 minutes on the Jala. So I might spend an hour working on that, which might be roughly the kind of time we'd be playing the concert, playing the Rag for. So I would make sure that I did all of those different subjects, and then I would do the same for the next Rag, or maybe the next Rag we were only doing one composition, so it was shorter. But I worked out that if I did a bit of everything, of all the maybe 4 different Rags or so, then that would take me about 6 hours just to do about 15 minutes on everything. And I could easily spend an hour, like today we're going to spend about an hour just doing this Drut in Kirvani, just one composition. I could easily spend a whole hour for several days in a row just working on that one area. But in that situation, I had to sort of carefully map out the practice time over the different areas to make sure that I'd touched a bit of everything. But my practice, my level of playing was developing all the time in that kind of process. So maybe by the time I got to Rag number 3, I was so warmed up by doing Rag number 1 and Rag number 2 that by the time I got to Rag number 3 for that day, my hand was just very in tune. So I got into Drut and my mind was already in tune, and my fingers everything was just working. So the accumulation really helps. But what I tend to do, if I'm not working on a specific target, I will go through phases where I'm really just thinking about tihais and thinking about different tans and different speed picking patterns. And then I'll go through a phase where I'm just not as focused on that, and I'll think purely about the alap. But when you go through a very intense stage of working on something, so if you spend a long time doing all of the if you go through a phase of like a couple of weeks where you're doing that a lot, then you'll find that you can afford to focus on something else for a few weeks. And as long as you still play a lap, you still come every now and then and you play 10 minutes or so, focusing on that, you'll kind of keep it together. But also, after, I mean, I can feel right now that movement is a little bit stiff because I haven't done it that much today. But just after a few minutes of focusing on that, it can quite quickly come back to life. And I find that with picking as well, like fast picking, again, like I haven't really warmed this up right now, so I kind of feel like things are a bit not as fluid as they could be. But if I just kind of get into it and get that moving, and then maybe start to so for example, I might find that I get a bit of movement, but if I came back to that maybe in half an hour's time, or even just if I put the guitar down for 10 minutes and picked it up again, then that would probably feel easier, because it's just, you're kind of just firing up those circuits. So once you've practiced something a lot, then you can come back to it. Maybe you haven't played that for a few days, that particular kind of pattern. You can come back to it, and the sort of the circuits, you know, in your brain and your fingers are already laid down, so all you have to do is kind of like wake up those circuits and maybe just play around with it for a few minutes, and then you can very quickly get back to, you know, the more of the height that you were when you were doing that a lot. So a lot of these things kind of get stored up over time. So I find myself just focusing on what is particularly interesting to me at a particular time, and I'll focus on that for a while and then move on to the next thing. So yeah, you really have to do what's really grabbing you, but try to go through, I that's what I would advise. What works for me is I try to go through phases where I get really in depth on something, and then other phases as well where I'll try to balance things out and try to do a bit of everything. Especially if I've got a recital, then I'll make sure that I've had a good go at a few things. Okay, so maple fret, yeah. So when with the bending, I'm using stainless steel frets. I've got very tall stainless steel frets on the guitar, so that helps. But a lot of it is, I mean, the strength. If you give me a regular guitar, with normal nickel steel frets, I can still do kind of extreme string bending. A lot of it is really the strength, and just getting the right sort of stability in your hand and building up the stamina, and a lot of it is the movements. It's just getting that feeling that you can bend the string, but then you can handle kind of those nuanced movements. So a lot of it is just it really is the technique. In terms of the equipment, I mean, if you've got stainless steel frets that are very tall, it will mean that you can probably pull the string a bit further and it will feel a bit nicer because it has less resistance. I don't really think you get any more resistance from a maple fingerboard or between maple and rosewood, because you shouldn't really be moving against the... I mean, this is lacquered anyway, so it feels very smooth, but you shouldn't really be contacting the actual fretboard very much, especially if you've got taller frets. Then you don't contact the fretboard as much. If it's scalloped, then yeah, you can kind of get more over the top of the string. If it's scalloped, like I have an acoustic guitar that's got scalloped frets, and you can really get over the top of the string when you pull it down, more like a sitar technique of bending. So that means that you can pull it further and kind of harder. But it's just really the technique most of all. It's useful if you've got stainless steel frets and taller frets, but that's not going to really make it that much easier. It's much more about the technique, and just doing small bends and then mastering those really, and then the bigger bends just are just an extension of that foundation. Okay, so I won't be going into a different rag because I'm going to start to keep working through this composition in Rag Kirvani, and I'm going to start talking about the different Tihar rhythms that we can play. Fingers sweat a bit and catch the fretboard. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, try getting taller frets, jumbo frets on your guitar. That might help if you find that you're catching against the fretboard and that's giving you some friction. But because you don't try to think about it like you should have your tip of your finger on the string, and as you're bending the string, you're kind of almost getting like on top of it as you're pulling it down. That's like the biggest bend that I can do, is like from pa to sa. I couldn't do that on a guitar without stainless steel frets, because that gives you more range. You can really pull. I mean, I might be able to do it on the other guitar which doesn't have stainless steel frets, but it's just about trying to get the right connection with the string. But it's difficult. It depends on maybe the shape of. Have you got bigger pads on your finger? Have you got bigger fingers? Is the guitar not the right kind of neck for you? But definitely having bigger frets, taller frets would help. And scalloped, if it was scalloped fingerboard, then yeah, then there's just nothing in the way. So that could make a big difference for certain players. It depends on how you're physically connecting with the instrument. So I'm going to go back to this composition, and now I'm going to talk about some basic Tihar rhythms, and then how to actually match different Tihar rhythms up with the cycle, with the composition that's in the cycle of Tintal. Okay. So far we were talking about just finding the first beat and then improvising and coming back to that first beat. So you can really feel that first beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1. Okay. And then improvising but going back to beat 7. So finding a way to just merge back into that composition starting on beat 7. So then looking at Tihar rhythms, you can just start with just very simple ones. So 1, 2. Okay, so there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these kind of things that you just do something times by 5, and you often do things where you use the same phrase but then shorten it down. So that starts on beat 9, and it has a shorter gap. The other one I did was so it had a bigger gap. And I'll do the shorter one again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so you can hear that one's got a shorter gap, but it's the same phrase. So you start to play around with these kinds of things. So then you try to improvise and then join onto that Tihar rhythm. So the faster one started on beat 9. Oh no, that was a slower one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I can improvise and then come back to that. So now what I'm listening for is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Listening out for that when I'm improvising. I could change the notes as well, so I could maybe come at it from above. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's the same rhythm, it's still the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's just using different notes. So improvise and come back to that. Often going into the different one, which has a longer gap. I seem to just be preferring the feeling and the sound of that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that one, that's an interesting one in this context, because that one starts on beat 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it starts on beat 7, but comes back to the 1. So you can see it's got a longer gap because we started it a bit earlier in the cycle. So that means that you have to space it out a little bit more. So yeah, we can improvise and come back to these different variations. And then that one has no gap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that comes on a beat 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I did that right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That one sounds quite funny because of the note choice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That one sounds kind of more odd because of the note choice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it sounds a lot clearer when we do it with more of a straight succession of notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that just has no gap because we've pushed that one as far as we can. So you can play with these things so you have a no gap or a short gap or a larger gap. So that just gives you an idea. You're always improvising and then trying to find those. So let's do some improvisation and I'll come to the one which starts on beat 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Yeah, let's try again. This is genuinely, I'm practicing that. I haven't done that for a while, or at least I haven't done that actually in Rag Kivani. So these are the kind of things that we're always looking at different tihais and trying to change them round a little bit. So sometimes when you're doing a practice session, you think, oh, okay, well, I haven't done fives for a while. Let's just do purely fives for a bit. And then, oh, maybe I haven't done it with this rag. So it's often a kind of fresh experience because there's so much to practice and you're improvising. So I'm trying slightly different things that I'm thinking about more recently with my improvisation, and then trying to join that onto something that I've done before, but I haven't done it in a while. So it feels kind of still quite fresh to me. So the process that this is kind of genuine practice, how you really try to work within a particular constraint and you try to just be inventive within that kind of constraint. But because you've given yourself that focus, it gives the music a lot more sense of purpose and very clear kind of shape to it. So now what we can start to look at is doing a Tihai composition, a Tihai rhythm that comes onto the beat 7. So then we can start the composition. You remember this? So now we're looking for a Tihai rhythm that will join directly onto the... So now the calculation needs to work so it lands on beat 7 instead of on beat 1. Okay, so a good way to do this, just to simplify in the beginning, a good way to remember is that you can start things on the beat of the composition that you know are 16 beats long. So if the composition starts on beat 7, I could play a Tihar rhythm which I know is 16 beats, and that will come back to the same beat that I left on. So I can come back to the beat of the composition. This is something that you can do when you're just playing Tihar compositions that start on beat 1 and end on beat 1. There's a kind of basic way to do it in the beginning. Just start on beat 1, end on beat 1, so you know the Tihar is 16 beats long. But you're not really thinking about the fact that it's 16 beats long, you're just thinking about start this on beat 1 and you'll get back to beat 1. So we can just shift that round to beat 7. So I'll give you an example of that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. So the third time it joined back onto that signature phrase. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. Back to the composition. So if I started that on beat 1, you'd see how that would start and end on beat 1. On beat 1, okay? I'll do that again. I'll change the notes though. Okay, coming back to beat 1. Beat 1 to beat 1, or beat 7 to beat 7. Sorry, I missed it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now I want to be able to improvise and come back to that one on beat 7. But it's going to be more achievable to do that straight away because I've already practiced improvising and coming to beat 7 to start the melody. So what I did earlier, this kind of... start again, so... Improvising coming to beat 7. So now what I'm sort of doing is replacing the composition, replacing that with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now let's improvise and try to come back to that Tihar pattern. Talking about what I'm doing so much, it's not that easy sometimes to then go and do it. I just lost my concentration. Let's try again. Okay, there we go. I'll give you 1 or 2 more examples of improvising. trying to do it in quite a seamless way, so the Tihar rhythm comes flowing straight out of the melody, so it doesn't sound like just separate ideas, it sounds just like a natural flow going back into that Tihar. That's what I'm trying to kind of create. So it doesn't sound too mathematical, it just sounds like a natural progression and a natural conclusion to the line that I'm playing. But because I'm doing it over and over again, I'm getting used to finding that. So when I'm improvising in a real concert situation, I'm quite naturally going to go into that kind of pattern because it's become more internalized through the repetition of improvising and always coming back to that a few times. But in a concert, you might only play that once. You know, you might do it a few other times if you made a point of contrasting the way that you improvised to seem that you were doing like a theme and variation. But usually you just do a Tihar once and then move on to something else. But of course you can only do that when you've developed more of a repertoire of them. Okay, so maybe let's look at another one that also starts on beat 7, just so you can hear that they can sound very different. So let me just gather my thoughts for a moment. 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's another one that starts on beat 7 and then comes back to beat 7. So just to make that clear, if I did that on beat 1, it would start and end on beat 1. Okay, and if I ended that on Sa, it would sound a bit more natural. Could maybe end it each time on Sa as well. So that's more of a typical sort of sum to sum Tihar. But then if I move that again to beat 7, I could play the same thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I just changed the last note, so it began the composition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's always coming back to that one. Okay, so I could improvise and then look for that Tihar. So improvising and looking for that Tihar, still on beat 7, so I'm not having to remember much at the moment. I just have to remember beat 7 for the composition and for those 2 Tihars. So now what we could try is doing a Tihar which starts from a different place in the cycle, but still comes to beat 7. There we go. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, there we go. I've remembered the one I was trying to do. So that one is actually interesting because that starts on beat 15, and it's a group of 3 5s, but played 3 times. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you do, there's a gap of 2, and then again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, landing on the composition. It's funny, sometimes the bigger, more complicated ones, I find them easier to remember just on the spot because they're so big that they've taken up a larger part of my memory, so I can remember them. Sometimes with the smaller, shorter ones, there's so many of them that what often happens, I find, when I'm improvising, is that the smaller, shorter ones tend to just come up naturally, just a spur of the moment. But sometimes there's so many little variations that it's quite hard sometimes to remember all of the different variations right on the spot. But I'm still getting used to doing these live streams. These are really quite intense because I feel the pressure of trying to get everything right and trying to jump through every single hoop I've set for myself. And after doing it for about an hour, it's yeah, people make mistakes. So, but I can remember that one. The reason I was talking about that one is that it's just an example of a Tihar rhythm that still lands on beat 7 to join the composition, but it doesn't start on beat 7, it doesn't start on beat 1, it starts from somewhere totally else in the cycle. And it's also a longer one that takes longer to resolve. Particularly the second repeat of the 3 groups of 5 sounds very strange and unusual because it's very offbeat at that point. So I'll play it for you a few more times and then I'll try improvising and coming back to that. And I'll tell you just the simple way that I'm managing to find beat 15, because that might sound difficult. It's not as hard as you think. Okay, here we go. I got it wrong. Let's try again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so that's just to show you that it's beat 15. But what's actually a lot easier is if you come back to what I was saying earlier about feeling it as 4 groups of 4, then you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And you can also feel that the first group of 5 lands on beat 1, so then you know really sure that you've got it right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So you can feel that that's landing on beat 1. And if I get used to that, actually, then I don't even need to count. So. So now, how about some improvisation and then leading back to that? So as I improvise, I'm going to just be playing things that fall into those sort of groups of 4. So I know I'm doing 3 groups of 4 and then a 2. Okay, so I won't be counting so much, but I'll be feeling the sets of 4 as I'm playing. Actually, that time as I was doing it, sometimes I was sort of sensing the beat or sort of tracking the beat, but I found that I was actually listening out more just for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just listening out for that. So like da din din da da din din da da tin tin da din da 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 dun. I was just trying to catch hold of that one. So if I can just hear that group of 5 notes leading to the first beat, da 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 dun, then I can just follow on from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that part sounds kind of almost more complicated than it is, because you're not really used to thinking of things in 5 so much, or maybe you are if you're more into these kinds of rhythms, but it sounds like the phrase kind of folds back on itself before it's finished. So it sounds like it's repeating, but in a kind of slightly interrupted sort of like, it's got a funny sort of cycle to it. But it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's the rhythm. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The middle group of 5 sounds, it's offbeat. It's kind of the opposite beats to the first and the third. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You kind of feel the rhythm differently. And then when it does the 2 rests, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It lands back on B7. So that's a more sophisticated one. That's actually what we'd call a chakradar. So I'm glad I managed to finish with a chakradar. That's a tihai is 3 times. It's 3 times of a phrase. So if I do a phrase that repeats 3 times and I do that 3 times as well, then that becomes a chakradar. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So 3 times 5 times 3. That gives you the chakradar. So this is again the kind of thing that you get that pattern going, and then you try to improvise and meet that pattern to come back to the beat number one, or back to the beat of the composition. So this is really improvisation, but doing it in a very particular rhythmic framework with a composition, and the composition defines how all of the different rhythms, how the different Tihar rhythms are going to work to join back with that composition. So just want to give special thanks to my gurus Shakir Khan and Roopa Panesar. Shakir Khan particularly because this composition, I heard him play it in Rag Kirvani, and really loved it and really wanted to try working on it myself. And some of the Tihars I'm doing, I've heard him do specifically. Others I've just been inspired so deeply by his style that I've tried to incorporate that and make up ones of my own, but ones that maybe have a bit more of that feeling. Or they could be ones that I've maybe heard before, but I can't quite remember where I've heard them, and I'm not sure if I've thought of them or if I've heard them. It all just becomes part of your kind of musical landscape. You just kind of hear these things going round and round in your mind. So thanks so much to Shakir Khan. He's the son of Shahid Pervez, and they have just such an incredible approach to the tihais, to the rhythms, and their melodic playing is absolutely extraordinary as well. But today we've been looking particularly more at the rhythmic side of it. And they're particularly known for doing these kind of tihais that land perfectly on the beat that the composition starts. That's something that they just do that so beautifully. So that's something that I've just been trying to demonstrate. Yeah, thanks for bearing with me earlier on. About 10-15 minutes ago, I started to lose my concentration a bit, and I couldn't remember the simple tihais that I was trying to do, but I'm glad that I remembered that more complicated one to try to finish with. So thanks very much, and just to let you guys know, I'm going to be doing another live stream performance next week, on Wednesday next week, and if all goes to plan, I'll be doing that other live stream. I'll be notifying people about it about 2 days before, so early next week I'll be notifying people. And if you like this kind of thing, there's lots more videos on my channel, and please subscribe and stay tuned for future live streams. And if you really like what we're doing here, then you could visit the indianclassicalguitar.com website, visit the Indian Classical Guitar Academy. It's linked in the description, and you can become a member, and you can join more private live streams that are just for the students, and there's just hours and hours. There must be something like 20 hours of really in-depth discussion and lessons, and teaching all different rags, different compositions, different techniques. And what I was doing today was just more of a demonstration, just to show some of the ideas and improvising and playing around with these things. But the lessons that I do on the guitar courses are really very step by step and very slow, and I make sure that everything is really, really clear. So they're very in-depth guitar lessons. So today, if some of it went over your head, don't worry about it. Today was really just me showing, right, this is the kind of thing that I would practice, and this is the kind of thing I would build up to doing in a recital performance, just to kind of get you into the ideas of what we're doing, not to try to play what I'm playing right now, but just to get into the ideas. But the guitar courses are much more prescriptive and just build you up kind of step by step. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check out the website. So thanks very much for joining, guys, and I'll see you on another lesson next week. We're probably doing a live stream performance next week, yeah, and then more videos coming out all the time. Okay, thanks very much. See you next time.